Who would this earlier population have been? And why is it that they decided to migrate? Well, it seems that coinciding with the migration south, Upper Nubia was experiencing an increase in aridity, as well as a sharp increase in population size. To combat this, some goat herders would have taken to migrating south in search of greener pastures for their flocks of caprines. In due time, in their relatively uncontested march south, they would come across a grazing gold mine in the Great Lakes region, where the evidence suggests that their remarkably rapid migrations began to slow down. Similar to the Lothagamites, the pre-Kerma populations, the best candidates for the culture associated with the ancestors of the Lothagamites, would practice traditions of burials with elaborate grave goods, as well as similar forms of monumental mortuary expression. This would continue on until the Kerma period, best exemplified by the many tumuli of the Eastern Cemetery. More on that in a separate video. Nevertheless, a preeminent distinguishing factor in their forms of expression was the extensive use of cattle by the Middle Nile groups, where cattle hadn't, to our knowledge, been adopted by the early Pastoral Neolithic groups, though they certainly had knowledge of cows, as can be seen by this zoomorphic stone palette that mimicked a cow found at Lothagam North Pilotite. The diet of the pre-Kerma Upper Nubian populations, much like that of the Lothagamites, seemed to consist of the meat and milk of their livestock. Milk was consumed at such high volumes by the pastoralists of this region that 2-lactase persistence genes would develop in East Africa. But while the pre-Kerma populations would, by 2500 BC, adopt a more sedentary lifestyle as the climate took a favourable turn, the culture bearers of the early Pastoral Neolithic wouldn't take the same route. In their day-to-day lives, after they had tended to their flocks, they would hunt down animals that occupied all rungs of the Lake Turkana ecosystem totem pole. And for all kinds of reasons, gerbils and jackal were targeted for their teeth that would be used to decorate jewelry. If a status symbol is what you were after in the early Pastoral Neolithic society, decorating yourself in rings made of hippo ivory was probably the way to go. Going by the demonstrated burial goods, such as at Burial 3, where 403 gerbil teeth from over 100 gerbils were used to make a single headpiece, or at another burial where 12 perforated, strung together hippo tusks were found, it becomes clear that game hunting was a very important part of life here. An abundance of grazing lands in the shrublands of northwestern Kenya could have meant that the herders had enough spare time to pursue activities not directly associated with the survival of their flocks or their kin. Still, between protecting your livelihood from the apex predators of the plains of Kenya and others who would love to have it for themselves, there were surely enough sources of danger to sustain even the greatest of adrenaline freaks among them indefinitely. Why would they, then, put so much time and their health at risk obtaining these items? One could speculate. Perhaps in a ritual manhood initiation process similar to what is seen in the region today, bands of young men would have to take it upon themselves to hunt a hippo to completion, and only once the meat and goods were brought back to their community could they marry. Maybe the motivation was more explicitly tied to status, and it was the job of trained individuals to subdue such dangerous animals for their own gain. The same question could be asked of their mass burial tradition. Why did they go that extra mile? Why did these presumably hardy shepherds make such a concerted effort to carry particularly heavy, pillar-shaped stones from far lands just to erect them at a burial site in a very specific orientation? What was the use? And was there a deeper meaning? Earlier scholars who had studied the site posited that the pillars served an astronomical purpose, similar in nature to the world's first astronomical site, built not too far from their ancestral homeland, just 1,000 years prior, at Nabta Playa. Later work would shed doubt on these claims, with the pillars not lining up with the stars that they were meant to be tracking. Newer theories point to a more practical purpose for them, with there being some evidence of a flaw under the pile of stones with animal remains, indicating a ritual feast associated with these burials. This too is a custom that was observed in the later Middle Nile cultures, most famously in Kerma, with the early royal burials having up to 5,000 cattle crania decorating a single tumulus, with cut markings on discarded cattle remains, resembling those seen in culinary preparations rather than ones purely ritual. Unlike many other cultures of the Neolithic, there seemed to be no consistent burial position associated with the people of the site. Instead, bodies were interred into pits in manner such that the goal was to fit as many bodies as possible into them. The bodies would reach surface level at Lothegam North Pillar site with between 600 and 900 bodies fitted into it, before the entire platform was mounded with 30 to 50 centimeters of fill and capped with rounded, uniformly sized basalt pebbles. Along with a lack of coherent and consistent burial orientation, a lack of marked social stratification was also noted, which was a surprise to many given the great task of building such a site. And maybe this was a sign of their way of life. In a land of such great abundance, the Lothagamites perhaps didn't experience the necessary pressures to create societies with order, to create stratified societies like those in Egypt, the Middle Nile and the Eastern Desert. And while their kin who had ridden the proverbial storm in Upper Nubia were building impressive Bronze Age metropolises, the lax nature of the early pastoral Neolithic may have been their undoing. After only a single millennium, sites like Lothegam were seemingly abandoned and newer ones weren't built. Novel migrants from a similar region from whence their ancestors originally came, with newer pottery styles and similar yet distinct DNA, were the likely culprits behind the end of the traditions of building such funerary complexes. They would go on to spark a new age of pastoralism in this region, and later penetrate deep into the subcontinent with their cattle.